When you come into West Coast Armory North, you know you'll get great service. But did you also know that we offer the lowest prices around, guaranteed? That's right, we will meet or beat any local price, even the big box stores. Why would you go anywhere else? And for a limited time, mention this ad and get a free range pass or 10% off any accessory in the retail shop. Swing by the range and check it out, meet the sales pros in our store, and see those low prices you keep hearing about. Visit our website at westcoastarmorynorth.com and bookmark our news page for special events and promotions. We're also on social media. Just search West Coast Armory North. See you there.
Thinking Tactically is a paid program. The information provided is not legal advice and should not be used in lieu of legal counsel. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and their guests are not necessarily those of West Coast Armory North or this station.
Every day, we hear stories of innocent people who are the victims of violent crimes. Do you want to leave your personal defense up to someone else? Or take the initiative and be responsible and prepared to defend yourself and your family? If you answered yes, this is the show for you. Thinking Tactically, personal security for today's world. And now, here are your hosts, John Holshin and Kevin Smith.
Good morning and welcome to the show. I'm Kevin Smith.
And John Holshin.
And this is Thinking Tactically. Today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at personal security in the news and lessons learned. We're going to be talking about firearms in the home. We're going to be joined in studio by a special guest, Greg Hamilton, the founder of Insights Training here in Puget Sound. And then we're going to be talking about home defense, introduction to thinking about what's going on with your home defense. All right, let's get to the news. And then
So terrorism is in the news again. It's a recurrent theme, of course, part of the realities of modern life, it seems. The attack on the airport in Brussels resulted in at least 30 killed and over 200 injured. You know, I travel a fair amount, and it's interesting as I observe and talk to people about security while traveling. Most people have this concept that the airport is a relatively safe place because of all the security measures that are there. And as the Brussels attack points out, until you cross through that security barrier, what you actually have is a venue where you have a high concentration of victims and a very public venue that anybody can access. So we need to think about how we want to move through airports. You have to realize that the checkpoint is among the most dangerous areas that you can imagine, because that is where people are going to be detected, as well as its location where there is a predictable concentration of victims. Everybody's backed up there waiting their turn to go through that checkpoint. So what we want to do is we want to minimize the amount of time that we spend in any danger area, and this is definitely an identified danger area. So what can we do in advance to make sure that our time in that checkpoint area is the absolute minimum? First thing is organize yourself and your gear ahead of time. You don't want to be having to stand right there outside the checkpoint area, getting the stuff out of your pockets, deciding where you're going to put your wallet, your keys, your ticket, all that sort of thing. So organize yourself and your gear beforehand. Know the rules and follow them. You know what is allowed and what isn't allowed. If you haven't traveled a lot, look that stuff up in advance so you know how you're going to have your liquids, how much liquids you can have. You don't want to have anything that delays your passage through that zone is really what we're after. As you approach the X-ray machine yourself, this is another area that is very common for theft in airports. And again, people don't really think about pickpockets and theft and that sort of thing in airports. But particularly in Europe, there's a whole class of criminal that travels in the airports and conducts their crimes inside those secure zones. You've got high-level pickpockets, basically, that go to work every day by taking commuter flights around Europe, for example. So they're inside that secure zone where people think, oh, what's the chance that somebody's going to do something here? It's contained. It just doesn't seem like it would be smart for them. Actually, that's what makes it a very good location for that pickpocket to operate in. So what kind of things is, again, we go back to approaching that X-ray machine. That's a place where somebody can pick up the wrong bag, either accidentally or on purpose. So as I come up again, I'm going to make sure that I can go through there as smoothly and quickly as possible. Nothing extra in my pockets. My belt is off already if I've got a big belt buckle that's going to show up or going to cause that detector to go off while my belongings are going through the X-ray machine. I watch the person in front of me as he goes through the machine, and I don't let go of my bag and let it go down that conveyor until I know the person ahead of me has made it through the magnetometer that he's walking through. Because one of the ways that the criminals will take advantage of that situation is they'll tarry on the other side of the machine, and they can actually set up one of their guys to have extra keys or whatever in his pocket. They see your expensive bag go through. The guy in front of you now creates a delay and has to go back through. Your bag has come off the conveyor on the other side, and you're not there to receive it. They can do a switch on you, or they can just screen it off and be walking off with your bag to the nearest bathroom or place out of the way where they can go through it quickly, dump the bag, and have your valuable items out of that bag. So again, I don't let go of my bag until I see the person in front of me is making it through. Then I keep my eye on my items as they go through that metal detector imager and watch them come out the other side. If for some reason I'm pulled aside for extra screening, I make sure to immediately identify my bag and ask them to bring the bag over to me immediately. Don't let them walk you out of sight of your bag and then wonder what's happened to it. Particularly if you're traveling in the third world, the fact of the matter is the security people may be in on the plan. So, what's that? Trust but verify is one of those things. We definitely want to do that as well. As I come out the other side, I want to pick my stuff up and move out of the area immediately. Slip-on shoes are great because you can just get them on. You can reorganize your clothes, your wallet, but your watch back on, all that kind of stuff. Don't do that right there at the security checkpoint. Just pick up the bag that you've put all that stuff in. You know what pockets it's in. Pick it up, move out of sight of the area, then pause and put your belt back on and get your watch back on and all that kind of stuff. The real key here is stay alert at all times, even within that secure zone.
So, John, what about situations where you have a long layover, where you're stuck in the airport 4, 5, 10 hours? What should people do with their belongings, what they're doing to make sure they're safe there?
Sure. I mentioned pickpocket.
When you said pickpockets, I actually reached back and touched my wallet to make sure it was sitting there, because you were sitting there talking about pickpocketing.
Yep.
And I'm like, instinctively, where's my wallet?
Exactly. So one of the things to do while traveling, it's a lot harder for somebody to pick your pocket, your front pockets versus your rear pockets, your back pockets. So men, particularly when traveling, move your wallet out of that back, quote, wallet pocket into one of your front pockets. It's much more secure there, much more difficult for somebody to do that casual bump and pick up your wallet. Ladies, same thing with your purse. Keep it around in front of you, or if it's on your side, your arm over it. Even on your side with your arm over it, you've got, you can go onto YouTube and see all kinds of videos of pickpockets at work, and they're really slick at reaching right in there, unzipping that. And if it's not in sight, it's a potential target for them. If you swing your purse around in front of you, now they've got to be more likely in your field of vision. They don't want to deal with that, so they're going to go after somebody else.
So what about bringing that strap up over your head?
Yeah, that's an important concept. It's one that we have to be a little bit careful of. In some third world countries, a very common method of a purse snatching on the street, we're outside the airport now, is a drive-by on a motor scooter. And the issue is, we don't want to lose our purse, but I also don't want to be drugged down the road at 15 or 20 miles an hour. There are a couple of companies that make bags and purses that have security features, such as a cable hidden inside the strap. And that's something that, having seen that done one time, the drive-by purse snatching that just popped the strap right off the purse, I thought about, if they had one of those cables in there, that might have really injured that lady. So yeah, it's a little bit of a balancing act there. Another thing I think about when I'm going to be in an airport for a long period of time, again, particularly in the third world or some less savory places, is can I get myself out of the general crush of humanity that's in there? If you travel a fair amount, you might consider the airline travel club lounges. They're not inexpensive, but that ability, particularly late at night when you're tired, to get yourself out of the crush of humanity into an area that is a little more secured, and people would have to pay to get in there. So if you don't travel a lot, many of those places offer day passes where you can just you can pay a single usage fee rather than an annual subscription.
All right, so those are some great lessons that you can take when you're traveling, anytime you're at the airports. I know that started with bringing up the terrorist attacks that had occurred in Brussels, but it's just a great thing to remember is when you're traveling to take the time to make sure that whatever you're doing is done in a safe manner and that you're taking care of your belongings while you're at the airport. All right, John. Well, it looks like we got a couple questions that came in from last week's show. We've got Steve that asked a question about carrying position. He wants to know what the best position to carry a concealed firearm, and then what type of holster you recommend.
Yeah. So, Steve asked specifically about appendix carry. And, appendix carry has become quite popular in the last few years. And it has its pros and its cons. It's like everything else. But one of the major considerations for me is that if we're talking concealed carry here, we need to think about what type of garment we're using to conceal it. And you either have a shirt with the tails out, in which case it doesn't really matter where the gun is on your belt. It could be in front of you or over on your hip or even behind the hip, and it all works the same. But the other type of carry garment would be a center opening garment, like you've got a tucked in polo shirt and you're wearing a light vest. So like around here, so much of the year, I can wear a light fleece vest and just, nobody thinks anything of it except really in the heat of the summer. So I've got more flexibility if that gun is not around my belly appendix area where I've got to have tails out. If you go into, a little more formal work environments, for example, where, tails out just aren't going to cut it, it just gives me more flexibility. So I personally carry behind the hip, behind the strong side hip is my favorite, but appendix carry works also. The other thing is limitations for training. Most schools are not going to want you to be carrying an appendix carry for training. A lot of reps in and out. You've got to just be really, really careful. You're bringing the gun more in alignment with your own anatomy when you're going to appendix carry, and also with the other people on the firing line with you. So it's possible, but if you're going to do training if you're going to go to formal training, you want to contact them first to make sure that they'll allow appendix carry.
Okay. And then he asked if you have any recommendation types of holsters.
Yeah, I'm a little old school. I really love leather, and Kramer Leather right here in the Pacific Northwest is just an awesome company. I travel. Frankly, people give me gear to try out all the time, and there's a lot of beautiful holsters, a lot of really nice gear, but I keep coming back to my Kramer. It just, in terms of durability and in terms of function, it's awesome. In Kydex, another local company is Blade Tech, and they've got a wide range, a wide variety of holster styles and types that pretty much fit everybody and every need. And matter of fact, that's what I'm carrying in right now is a Blade Tech inside the waistband holster.
Okay. And then our second question that we got was from Jeff, and he's new to firearms and he's looking to possibly get his first firearm, and he was wanting to know, for an entry-level firearm for sport and self-defense, what do you recommend that's easily concealed and kind of reasonable on the budget?
Yeah, this is one of those loaded questions because no matter how I answer it, I'm going to offend somebody. I love guns. Long before I owned a gun store, I had a safe full of guns. So I'm really not prejudiced against one type of gun or another. I love them all. I love the engineering. I love the mechanics. I love to shoot them. I love the different actions and that sort of thing. But if you're just getting into it, really simplicity is valuable and important to you. You want a trigger that's the same every time. So you don't want a double action, single action gun. The modern striker fired guns. You don't want it to be picky in terms of maintenance. There are some objective criteria, and when I run that objective criteria down, really I come to 3 guns, and that's the Glock 19 always heads the list. There's a reason that is that's become the issue concealment gun for the Navy SEAL teams. That's the issue concealment gun for U.S. SOCOM. That's the issue concealment gun for a bunch of other folks. There's a good reason why. The other 2 that are right there is the Springfield XD and the Smith & Wesson M&P Compact. So the XD, various barrel lengths, and somebody asked me the other day, what barrel length is your gun? I said, I have no idea. And I don't care. It's 3.5, 4, who cares? What's it really matter? The total size package of what you're concealing is what it's about. And an average size person can conceal a Glock 19, a Smith & Wesson M&P, or a Springfield XD, all in their kind of mid-size just fine. If you go smaller than that, they're real nice and compact and easy to conceal. And frankly, they're very difficult for people to learn to shoot well. When you start going to the Shield, that's the Smith & Wesson M&P Shield. When you start going to the Glock 43, great little guns, very challenging as a first gun. They jump more, they bark more. In the old days, we considered those little guns to be experts' guns. You don't develop your skill with those little itty-bitty guns. You develop your skill with a mid-size gun, and then you shoot the little gun enough to kind of remind yourself of the differences if you have to carry in deep concealment or that sort of thing.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for emailing in your questions. And remember, you can email us at thinkingtactically@gmail.com, and we will try to get to your questions next week. All right, we're going to take a short break here. You are listening to Thinking Tactically, Personal Security for Today's World on Fox Sports 1380.
You're listening to Thinking Tactically, Personal Security for Today's World. Brought to you in part by West Coast Armory North, providing expert personalized service to each individual client. For more information, log on to westcoastarmorynorth.com.
West Coast Armory North is known for its low prices and great customer service. But did you know we have training classes as well? In fact, we're introducing a new course, Handgun 101, designed with new and returning shooters in mind. Our Handgun 101 course is 3 hours long, covers handgun marksmanship, how to load, unload, and safely handle and fire a variety of handguns. All equipment is provided, and you'll leave with a free bronze membership to our range. All this for just $75. Sign up now on our website under the Classes tab at westcoastarmorynorth.com.
Insights Training Center is locally owned and nationally recognized and offers the most complete self-defense, firearms, and tactical training available to civilians and private organizations, law enforcement, and military. In business for over 20 years, they've taught more than 20,000 private citizens, law enforcement officers, instructors, SWAT teams, corrections personnel, security officers, and military personnel, offering classes from basic self-defense and handgun safety to advanced tactic classes and everything in between. Insights Training Center has a course for you. Their professional instructors come from highly specialized and thorough backgrounds in law enforcement, military special operations, and the private sector. Visit insightstraining.com for a complete list of upcoming classes.
The Northwest Women's Shooting Network is a comprehensive resource in person and online for all women's shooting needs and questions. Everything from basic education to continuing education, we're here to help you find and buy the right gun for you, get the proper skills for personal protection, and to create a welcome and safe environment to learn with other women. Coming from over 30 years of combined experience in the shooting industry, we are mothers, sisters, wives, and just plain awesome gals. In other words, just like you. Our commitment is to help you become an informed, skilled, confident woman. We are based out of West Coast Armory North in Everett, Washington, minutes north of Seattle. We offer a variety of events, seminars, training, and more. Already we have hosted a variety of events such as Kids Safety Day, Ladies Night Out, and shopping events. And we also hold regular women-only classes in addition to our Ladies Shooting Club and Ladies League. At the range, we have over 70 rental firearms for you to try before you buy, and every Thursday is Ladies Day. Find us at westcoastarmorynorth.com under the Women's Network tab and on Facebook at Northwest Women's Shooting Network.
Taking responsibility out of someone else's hands and putting it into yours. This is Thinking Tactically, Personal Security for Today's World. And now, back to more of the show. Here are your hosts, John Holshin and Kevin Smith.
Welcome back. We are now going to be talking about firearms in the homes. And as a reminder from last week's episode, we talked about universal firearms handling rules. And I just want to review before we get into the topic. Rule number 1 was always treat all guns as loaded. Number 2, never let the muzzle cover anything you are not willing to shoot. Number 3, keep your trigger finger indexed above the trigger guard unless your sights are on the target and you have decided to fire. And number 4, be sure your target and what is beyond it. All right, so John, I know you wanted to talk about what firearms in the home.
Sure. Building on universal firearms handling rules, we think about where can the gun be, where should the gun be. And we summarize this. We say there's really only 3 positions a firearm should ever be in. The first is secured. The second is at the ready, and the third is on target. Now, we're not going to talk about those second 2, at ready and on target, other than to say the firearm's in your hand at that point, and that's something that we'll get into when we talk about tactics and that sort of thing. But what we're talking about is how do you store that firearm yet have it easily accessible? By secured, we mean it's prevented from unauthorized access, and it's a real simple concept. You should know who is authorized to touch a firearm in your home, and you should store them in a way that they are the only people that can possibly come in contact with them. If you ever have kids in your home, whether you have children or not, if you ever have kids in the home, you've got to take that into account. If you have visitors in the home, and how do you secure your firearms when you're not home? in case of a burglary or something along those lines. Of course, the issue is that if we're talking about a defensive firearm, we want it to be secured, but we also want it to be accessible. And that obviously limits us a little bit. But what I do is I take, like so many things, a systematic approach, and I say, okay, these firearms are not part of the security plan. Perhaps you have a shotgun, you engage in hunting, or you shoot trap or skeet. Perhaps you have a small bore rifle or a centerfire rifle, and you have a handgun. Well, you decide which firearm is going to be part of your home defense plan, and the others need to be as secure as you can make them. Long before I had anything to deal with selling firearms products, I told people, don't buy a gun without the plan and the means to secure it. It's just, it goes hand in hand. You can't just take a gun home. Secured is not stuffed between the sweaters, on the top shelf of the closet. Particularly if you ever have kids in the house. I don't know about anybody else, but boy, I was nosy and liked to get into things. Christmas time, I might be looking for my Christmas presents in advance. You never know what's going to cause a kid to start looking in places where you wouldn't think they would look. But we just absolutely can't have them finding a firearm. There's just too many stories, too many incidents that have happened. I know of a number right here in our area, some involving law enforcement folks and their children and their family members. It's just unacceptable to have a weapon in any other way than secured.
When I was in elementary school, we had a student that was a classmate of mine that ended up shooting himself in the foot with his dad's firearm.
Yeah, tragic.
And when we talk about secure, I can tell you got to be very careful on that. A couple years ago, we had a home break-in where someone actually took the gun cabinet that was bolted to the wall out of our house.
Sure. Well, if a burglar has enough time, they're going to get anything. And that's one of the concepts that I talk about is I would rather, if they're going to get my gun, a kind of a worst case situation would be for them to access that gun, particularly a loaded gun, in my home and to still be there when I come home. So one of the things I look at with some of the gun lock boxes, I purposefully don't fasten them down. The boxes are secure enough and large enough that it would be they're an awkward size. For example, let's just talk a little bit about the different means to secure them, and I'll kind of come back to that as we go along. So most common and among the easiest are trigger locks and action locks. And trigger locks are what they sound like if you're not familiar with it. It's kind of a clamshell device that clamps over the trigger of a firearm so that no one can access the trigger without removing that device. A couple of issues there. Some of them, they have to fit the gun, and some do a better job than that than others. Otherwise, with some of them, you can get enough slack in there to still operate the trigger without removing that trigger lock. So that's something that I would look at if I'm going to use a trigger locking device. The other problem with a trigger lock is that they're not really, for the most part, made to access quickly. You don't want in a self-defense situation to be trying to fit a little key in a little keyhole in the dark while your hands are shaking because you're adrenalized by what's going on. And the combination ones aren't a lot better. You're talking very small controls and that sort of thing. So trigger locks aren't something that I really consider as part of my home security. I might put a trigger lock or an action lock on a gun that's in a case while it's in transport. An action lock is typically a cable that it's like a cable with a padlock on the end of it, and it's designed to go through the action, locking the action open on a firearm. The other thing is that a lot of the trigger locks and action locks, the locking mechanism themselves is really very inexpensive and poorly made and easy to defeat, either through picking that lock or shimming that lock or various methods. And again, if you've got teenagers, young kids in the house, 5 minutes on YouTube, you can find all kinds of videos about how to defeat various locks. And if that person then has access, unfettered access, maybe 2 or 3 times a week for a half hour to play with it, it probably won't be very many weeks before they figure out how to open that lock if they're motivated to do so. So I'm not a big fan, as you can tell, of trigger locks and action locks.
Yeah, that's definitely...
Yeah. I would much prefer that even my ready guns be locked inside a box where nobody can physically touch them and access them. And then it's just, okay, how is the box secured? Nowadays, we have everything from keys to biometrics with kind of classic combinations in the middle. And by biometrics, I mean, fingerprint scanners like some of you may have on your phone. You place your finger on a pad and it reads it. Yeah, that's something that I'm not sure I want to rely on in a hurry. I've had situations where I couldn't get into my phone because my finger was wet, and I had to dry my finger and then dry the phone, and back and forth. But I like just a simple push-button combination lock, and those come either electronic or mechanical. There's a particular type called a cipher lock that the military used for years, and a couple of different companies make them. But it's a 5-button, typically push-button mechanical lock that is very quick to access, yet absolutely secure. So that's my plan for immediate home defense guns. Handguns are in a lock box that are adjacent to that area. There would be one close by the bed in the bedroom, for example. It might be a situation where you might want to have more than one firearm in different parts of the house. But again, I look to secure them in that way with a lockbox. That way it is secured yet accessible.
Okay. And now I got a question, though, with the lock boxes, and you talked about the different types. You've got the biometric, you've got the push button, different things. You guys have those down there at West Coast Armory, right?
We do. Yeah, we have a variety of lock boxes there and other means to secure firearms as well, including boxes that I use when I travel, very small, appropriate for a single handgun, yet allow me to secure that in my luggage as well as in my vehicle or whatever, a situation that I'm not carrying the gun, but I'm traveling away from home also.
Okay. And you guys have both the push button type and the more advanced biometric.
We do. We have all three: the key, the push button combination, and biometric types.
What would you recommend then for somebody that has, say, like a shotgun that they're using as their home defense?
Yeah, it's a little more difficult, in all honesty. It's hard to find products that I really fit the bill, and I've played with a couple of different ones. There is a product, I don't stock it, and as a matter of fact, I'm not sure who makes it now, but it basically allows you to think of it's a base plate that mounts, for example, inside a closet to a stud. Then there are, before you mount that plate, there are various fittings that come through from the back that make it customizable to your particular shotgun or rifle. And then again, there's a clamshell type thing that goes on the front. I really didn't bring it up because, again, it may not actually be in production anymore.
So there's not a ton for the easy, ready access, but securing for the more rifle type.
Yeah, for long guns, for the most part, I see two things or hear two things from different people. Some do a methodology that they keep it locked in a gun box or safe during the day. And then unlock that container because it's slow to get into at nighttime. If you have a gun safe that is in an appropriate location, there are gun safes now with electronic push button locks that make it fairly quick to access, as well as biometrics also. And that's the direction that you pretty much need to go with long guns, is some sort of security container.
So not in the box spring.
Yeah, not the first place to that I'd want it to be. It's kind of lumpy to sleep on too.
Oh, I'm saying under the box spring, in the little.
Well, I do know people that take the rifle out of the safe at night and set it in the corner and lock the door to their room, so they're the only one, or there's no one in the room that is not authorized to access the gun. They're behind a locked bedroom door, and the rifle sits in the corner. When they get up, it then gets locked in the safe during the day.
That might be an easier one when you don't have kids.
Exactly.
And then you got to worry, though, when you keep opening your safe and leaving it open during the night, is what happens in that morning when you're sleeping a little bit and you're running out the door.
Sure.
And you forget to close it.
Absolutely. And that's, in all honesty, absolutely a rifle or shotgun is a superior from a ballistic point of view. But again, we come back to the handgun is just much handier and easier to deal with. And I'll be honest with you, I have various firearms in the house, but they're not part of the immediate access security plan. The long guns are not part of the immediate access security plan. I rely on my handguns for that.
Sounds good. Now you're listening to Thinking Tactically on KRKO 1380, and we'll be right back after this short break.
You're listening to Thinking Tactically, personal security for today's world. Brought to you in part by Insights Training Center, offering the most complete self-defense, firearms, and tactical training available to citizens, private organizations, law enforcement, and military. Online at insightstraining.com.
When you come into West Coast Armory North, you know you'll get great service. But did you also know that we offer the lowest prices around, guaranteed? That's right, we will meet or beat any local price, even the big box stores. Why would you go anywhere else? And for a limited time, mention this ad and get a free range pass or 10% off any accessory in the retail shop. Swing by the range and check it out, meet the sales pros in our store, and see those low prices you keep hearing about. Visit our website at westcoastarmorynorth.com and bookmark our news page for special events and promotions. We're also on social media, just search West Coast Armory North. See you there. The Northwest Women's Shooting Network is a comprehensive resource in person and online for all women's shooting needs and questions. Everything from basic education to continuing education, we're here to help you find and buy the right gun for you, get the proper skills for personal protection, and to create a welcome and safe environment to learn with other women. Coming from over 30 years of combined experience in the shooting industry, we are mothers, sisters, wives, and just plain awesome gals. In other words, just like you. Our commitment is to help you become an informed, skilled, confident woman. We are based out of West Coast Armory North in Everett, Washington, minutes north of Seattle. We offer a variety of events, seminars, training, and more. Already we have hosted a variety of events such as Kids Safety Day, Ladies Night Out, and shopping events, and we also hold regular women-only classes in addition to our Ladies Shooting Club and Ladies League. At the range, we have over 70 rental firearms for you to try before you buy, and every Thursday is Ladies Day. Find us at westcoastarmorynorth.com under the Women's Network tab and on Facebook at Northwest Women's Shooting Network.
Welcome back to the radio show dedicated to information and education about defending yourself. Thinking Tactically, personal security for today's world. Once again, here are your hosts, John Holshin and Kevin Smith.
Welcome back. You're listening to Thinking Tactically on KRKO 1380. We're going to be continuing our previous topic of home defense and firearms in the home.
Continuing on that theme, basically, of firearms in the home, we get to the home defense plan. And, you know, in my mind, the plan is more important than the tools in many cases. You can have all the tools. You can even have knowledge of how to use the tools. But if your head isn't in the right place, you don't have a viable plan, there's no guarantee you're going to be able to access the tools and or that you're going to use them in a way that is consistent with the outcomes that you're really looking for. So that's where it needs to start as far as I'm concerned, as a plan. And, you know, once I start thinking about home defense plans, really, we ought to have emergency plans in the home. What about fire? What about natural disasters? What, you know, particularly with your family members, have you talked about that type of thing at all? Do you have a fire plan for your house? Or do you have bedrooms on the second floor? You know, have you talked about how you, if you can't go down the stairs, what are the other ways out? It's just, we should think about safety and security planning in the home a little more than we typically do, in my opinion.
And definitely make sure that you're talking to, if you have children, about making sure that they understand what they need to do so that they aren't panicking in those situations and that they've already prepared. It's the reason why the schools go through their drilling regularly.
Exactly.
In the hopes that nothing happens, but if something did, that the kids at least understand what they need to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I start thinking about the plan, you know, self-defense is one of those situations that, frankly, a lot of people just wing it. And, you know, if you don't, and that works out sometimes and not so well other times. So I come from a military background, and so in my planning process, we start with what we call a mission statement. What are you trying to accomplish? Because you want to make sure that your plan is consistent with that. And if you don't know where you're trying to go, it's hard to plan out a route to get there. In the home, one of the things that bears thinking about is, in terms of your objective, your mission statement, what is it you're trying to protect? Are you trying to protect your property? Are you trying to protect your people? Well, most everybody will say absolutely the latter. I want to protect my people. But at the same time, if we look at actions that they consider doing when I ask them about different situations that might happen, if they really stop and think about it, they realize that their actions may not be consistent with what the priorities are. So for me, it's real simple. My people are the important thing. Property can be replaced, and in a best case, it's insured.
Yeah.
So I'll give you some examples from my personal situation. I am lucky enough to live in a house that is 2 stories, and all of the bedrooms are on the upper floor. So in my situation, if there was the bump in the night, the infamous bump in the night, maybe it's your spouse waking you up saying, wake up, there's somebody in the house. And as you wake up, you realize that, you're hearing noises, hopefully downstairs or in the other part of the house, not already on top of you, that you realize there may be somebody in the house. So, what's next? So here's kind of my priorities and how I look at it, the steps in the plan. Number 1 is get awake, right? Give yourself enough time to become awake. And you may be accessing your firearm as you're getting awake, but there's a conscious point there that I need to wake up. I need to actually get my brain in the game. So while accessing the firearm, and that push button lockbox is kind of a test of am I alert enough to get the gun out? If I'm not, I probably don't need the gun in my hand. So those people I'm getting at here is I know people that tell me they have kept a gun under their pillow at some point in their life. Maybe they lived in a bad neighborhood or had some particular threat.
And then we wonder why there's so many shootings of people shooting a family member.
Exactly, yeah. So, wow, so you have a gun under your pillow. You get your hand on that gun before you're even awake or not even being awake. Probably don't need it quite that accessible, in my opinion. So I'm going to wake up an arm. The next thing I look at is what I call a point of dominance. I want to get on to the 3rd step, which is calling 911, calling for help. But I need to know what's going on in my home to some degree as well, particularly if I have children in other rooms. So in my situation, we have what we call a point of dominance that is in my doorway of my bedroom, allows me to see the other 3 doorways and see down the stairwell. So I can make an assessment from there. There could be somebody in one of the other rooms at this point. I don't know, but I get a sense. Are the doors in the condition that they should be in? Whether that is normally closed and locked, depending upon the age of the people that live there, whether that's normally open, and you can hear and maybe get some visual sense of what's happening. So I move to that point of dominance and control. And at that point is when I would be calling 911, or in my case, my spouse would be calling 911 after having armed herself as well. So at that point, you tell the 911 operator, we have armed intruders in our house. This is our address. They should have your address anyway, but I'm going to go ahead and tell them just to confirm there's not an error in the 911 system. Now, I said armed intruders. Do I know that they're armed? Well, what the study of this type of criminal action has taught me, and interviews, some that I've conducted personally and others that I have seen on video. If there's a burglar that is going into houses at night, he absolutely has a plan of what he's going to do if he runs into somebody. And that plan almost always involves some sort of weapon, whether that's a firearm or whether that's a screwdriver with a 9-inch blade that he uses to pry his way in, or whether it's a pry bar. He absolutely has a plan of what he's going to do if he's confronted with a homeowner that attempts to restrain him. And it involves the use of a weapon. So absolutely, I am confident that my studies have taught me if there's a burglar in my house in the middle of the night, I plan that he is armed, and I want the police to think along those same lines. So there's an armed intruder in my house is the message that goes out. My next priority is, can I determine if all the people are safe? Are all the good people upstairs and safe? And are there no bad people upstairs? If I can make a quick trip down the hallway, past those rooms, a peek in, to confirm that all the good people are there and no bad people are, now all I need to do is hold the stairwell. You want to look for things, we call that a choke point. We want to look for choke points, those points of dominance and control, that we can isolate the bad guy from the good people. Obviously, if you run into somebody that shouldn't be there in one of the rooms, you're going to have to interact with them, and that's a whole another topic. We'll get out to it another session. But for right now, we're going to keep it a little simpler. That's where, depending again on the age of the other people in the home, they have given a certain signal, be verbal or otherwise, they know what to do, whether that is to hide in a closet, whether that is to move to a certain place in the room, whether that is to move into the master bedroom where the spouse is. That's something you work out depending upon the age of the people involved and kind of the layout. But I'd like to ideally plan this out and get to this point where I have all of the good people, I know their status, and no bad people can get to them. If I can accomplish that, I really don't have any interest in interacting with, my example, those bad guys downstairs. It may rub some of you wrong, but as far as I'm concerned, they can carry off the big screen TV. They can carry off whatever else downstairs. They can do pretty much anything they want downstairs, short of set the house on fire.
Well, and that comes back to the idea of what is your priority?
Exactly.
Is it lives or is it your property?
Sure.
And if you're looking to secure your property, that's the only reason to go downstairs at that point, if everyone else is safe and law enforcement is already en route.
Sure. And let's explore that, because I have people that question that line of thinking when we discuss this in class. And they say, John, really? You're just going to, just let them walk off with your stuff that you worked hard for? And people begin to get angry just even thinking about it. And I do as well. But I tell them, it's, again, what are the priorities? Let's just to put it in perspective. So I could go down there and confront these people and hopefully prevail. But here's where I'm coming from. I'm 20 years in the military, Green Beret. I have multiple black belts. I am a multi-time national pistol champion, tactical pistol champion. I have some skills. And you know what all that taught me? It taught me that I could go downstairs and lose that fight. There could be a guy hiding in the shadows that I don't know about. There could be a guy waiting outside looking through the window at what his buddies are doing inside. Bottom line is there's no guarantees. And what's most important? My family, my people. And that's where, and my continued presence in their life, not trading it off for my big screen TV. So everybody gets to make their own decisions. But my intent here today is to get you to think about that in advance, to think about what you want your plan to be. And I gave you just a rough outline. There's a lot of more detail in the plan, of course. But my intent is to get you thinking about what would you do if, and examining your thoughts on that and deciding in advance what your priorities are and whether, so that you can consider what actions would be consistent with those priorities. If you feel you need to go down there and challenge the bad guys and hold them at gunpoint so they can be arrested, so they can be released in 24 to 48 hours and be back out on the street because it's just a property crime, they didn't actually hurt anybody, that's totally up to you. And I understand the anger and the passion that somebody would come in and steal your stuff. But again, in my case, I make that assessment of my mission, my objectives, and I make a plan accordingly.
All right. Well, and that makes sense to me, of the idea that you're trying to protect your family, you're trying to protect the people, and then after that point, you want to make sure that you stay safe too. And going downstairs, you never know if you can avoid the conflict. That should be the goal, is to not go and confront someone in an armed situation. Because if you're going downstairs with a firearm, it's an armed situation.
Absolutely.
Somebody's down there with one. You never know who's there, what's going on, and it's better to make sure that everyone's safe first.
Yeah, that's my thoughts at least.
We're going to take a short break, and when we return, we'll be joined in studio by Insight's founder, Greg Hamilton. You are currently listening to Thinking Tactically on KRKO 1380. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thinking Tactically, personal security for today's world. Brought to you in part by West Coast Armory North, providing expert personalized service to each individual client. For more information, log on to westcoastarmorynorth.com. Insight's Training Center is locally owned and nationally recognized and offers the most complete self-defense, firearms, and tactical training available to civilians and private organizations, law enforcement, and military. In business for over 20 years, they've taught more than 20,000 private citizens, law enforcement officers, instructors, SWAT teams, corrections personnel, security officers, and military personnel, offering classes from basic self-defense and handgun safety to advanced tactic classes and everything in between. Insight's Training Center has a course for you. Their professional instructors come from highly specialized and thorough backgrounds in law enforcement, military special operations, and the private sector. Visit insightstraining.com for a complete list of upcoming classes.
The Northwest Women's Shooting Network is a comprehensive resource in person and online for all women's shooting needs and questions. Everything from basic education to continuing education, we're here to help you find and buy the right gun for you, get the proper skills for personal protection, and to create a welcome and safe environment to learn with other women. Coming from over 30 years of combined experience in the shooting industry, we are mothers, sisters, wives, and just plain awesome gals. In other words, just like you. Our commitment is to help you become an informed, skilled, confident woman. We are based out of West Coast Armory North in Everett, Washington, minutes north of Seattle. We offer a variety of events, seminars, training, and more. Already we have hosted a variety of events such as Kids Safety Day, Ladies Night Out, and shopping events, and we also hold regular women-only classes in addition to our Ladies Shooting Club and Ladies League. At the range, we have over 70 rental firearms for you to try before you buy, and every Thursday is Ladies Day. Find us at westcoastarmorynorth.com under the Women's Network tab and on Facebook at Northwest Women's Shooting Network.
You're listening to Thinking Tactically, personal security for today's world. Heard every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. on Fox Sports 1380. Once again, here are your hosts, John Holshin and Kevin Smith.
All right, welcome back. We are now joined in studio by Greg Hamilton, the founder of Insights Training. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, it's great to have you here. Why don't you go ahead and explain to our listeners a little bit about what Insights is?
Well, we're a self-defense training company, and we train people on firearms, tactics, unarmed self-defense, and most important, how to think about self-defense.
Okay. When did you guys start doing your trainings?
1990.
1990, so about 25 years?
Yep, long time.
That's good. It's a lot of experience there then, right?
Yes.
So what is it that separates you guys from some of the other training out there?
Well, probably right off the bat, our experience. We've been doing this a long time, and we learned a lot of our mistakes along the way. We've been able to fine-tune our curriculum and be able to look at the big picture of what goes on with self-defense, what's really required versus what people have a fantasy of what's required. Also, our curriculum is very different from other people's in that from the design standpoint, not that the student would notice it, but from the design point, it's designed kind of backwards. Instead of assembling a group of techniques to try to solve a problem, we're looking at a long-term answer and then building it back to what the first class needs to be to eventually get to that long-term answer. Where a lot of people's programs, they've selected, how to handle their gun or how to load their gun or how to hit someone, etc. And then as they look to add another class, all they're doing is bolting on a bunch of extra pieces to this first part, but the first part wasn't built with the idea of having the extra pieces attached to it. So eventually the whole system breaks down. People aren't able to remember everything, aren't able to think that quickly. Crisis events we're talking 3-second events. There's no time to be deciding and choosing and all these branches and which thing do I do and etc. So the system has to be built very intelligently so that in a crisis, in a 3-second event, you can actually do what you need to do.
Anybody is able to take your classes, right?
Absolutely. We start from the very, very beginning. So people that have never handled guns or never even thought about hitting someone can learn what they're doing. We start with teenagers and work all the way through most advanced training in the country.
Okay, and you do law enforcement as well?
Yeah, we teach military, law enforcement. Most of our law enforcement teaching is done to instructors and SWAT teams, so even in that area, it's at the highest level.
Okay.
Greg, if you're going to pick one thing to bring to people's attention having to do with self-defense and preparation, what would it be?
Learning to be aware. If people are aware, they never have to use self-defense. Well, actually, awareness is a component of self-defense, but most people are fixated on physical skills. And people come to classes to learn physical skills. They learn to come to class to get out of a grab or how to knock someone down and run away or how to shoot a gun. But the truth, what they should be getting from class is how to see the criminal from a block away. We should have thousands of stories from our students of I saw this thing happening and then I wasn't in it because I avoided it. We shouldn't have a lot of stories of people having to use their pepper spray or having to hit someone or having to pull a gun out. Those are actually failures of your first step, which is awareness.
That's awesome, and that's something that, I travel the country visiting and training at various schools, and Insights is really unique in that regard, really that focus, that emphasis, and it shows over the number of years you've been training, the number of people you have trained. You can't point to a lot of civilian uses of force because you've accomplished the objective you just described. They avoided that situation.
Right, 20,000 students, and all we have is stories of I avoided being a victim without ever having to really get to physical skills. So that's the key. But you have to learn physical skills at some point, because without your physical skills, you don't have confidence. Without confidence, you can't be relaxed enough to actually be paying attention, and everything ends up right in your lap. So at some point, you do have to learn physical skills. Physical skills gives you confidence. That confidence is then displayed in your body language. That confidence calms you to allow you to make good decisions. And we all know, if you're stressed, you can't be looking out a block away. You're focused right on exactly what's in front of you.
Sure, all that internal dialogue of your concerns with the situation.
Absolutely. So if you know you can handle basic situations, you don't have to be thinking about that. That's not in your mind. What's in your mind is, how do I get out of this thing long before it ever gets to me?
How does somebody develop that type of capability?
Time.
Time thinking about it, time hypothesizing about situations.
And time actually in the dirt learning the skills, So you have to have the physical time doing the techniques, and you have to, absolutely reflection time. You can't learn this stuff instantly. Yes, you can get a weekend of good skills, but where we see the biggest change in people is after a couple classes separated by a month or two apiece, and all of a sudden 6 months later, the light bulb just comes on, it all clicks, and their lives are very different after that.
Something that I've noticed that Insights does that is common in law enforcement training. Officers go through the academy. They do something called mock scenes, where they put them into actual situations. Can you tell me a little bit about how Insights is that a methodology that Insights uses?
Absolutely, though probably very differently from how other people do it. Most situational training, most scenario training is just throwing people into a mix and hoping that they get something out of it. I see people even advertising one-day scenario classes with no prerequisites prior. And basically all the person is doing then is wiring in whatever responses they already have, which are probably horrible responses, instead of learning skills and then being put into specific scenarios where the person needs to access and use the skills they were just taught. Most scenario training I see out there is set up for failure. It's not set up to be solved with the skills the student actually has. And the big problem with scenario training makes things permanent. And so we need to be very careful about what we make permanent in a person. The emotional context of scenario training will create a response that is accessible years in the future, and we want that response to be the best possible response.
So you'd say it's important. If I hear you right, you're talking about having actual exercises to develop skills before being thrown into basically a testing situation. And you're going to use the scenarios not to test, but actually to help ingrain those skills.
Absolutely. Well, of course it is, it's some degree a test. And, every scenario you're going to be in, you're definitely going to have failures, but the failures won't be because you didn't know what to do. The failure will be because you didn't do the right thing. You knew what to do, but you somehow didn't do it. But that's a valuable learning experience also, because we've all had that experience in life where we've made a grave error, and years later, a second prior to making that grave error again, we all said to ourselves, don't do that. And so that's important too. But you need to know what to do. When you say don't do that, you need to then have ingrained what you need to do. We need a progressively increasing stress level. We can't this isn't basic training in the military where we just start screaming at people and throwing things and it's chaos for 8 weeks, and then we finally teach them how to fold, how to make their bed properly, and then they finally can do that under stress. We need to realize people are only there for 4 hours or a day or 2 days or 3 days, and it needs to start with almost no stress and then very slowly progress in stress. Just in a self-defense class, just having a partner you're working with pretending to be a bad guy at intimate distance is stressful enough for the average person.
Sure.
Without adding anything into it.
Yeah, and that opportunity to exercise those scripts and to have in mind what are successful paths through this, that's invaluable.
Absolutely. Yeah, you need to spend the time doing it. You can't just do scenarios. Absolutely not.
Greg, can you help us understand maybe the relative importance of these physical skills versus the mental? And I mean, we understand the mental is by far the most important, but there's got to be something to fall back on, as you said, in terms of physical skills. In terms of firearms, what are we looking at there?
Sure, you have to be able to operate the tool unconsciously. This is no different than riding a bicycle or riding a horse or water skiing or whatever. If you're still trying to figure out how to pedal, if you have to think about how hard to turn the handlebars to make a turn, you're definitely not going to be on the BMX track. So, you need to do enough time that the gun disappears in a way and that all handles itself. And that takes hours, and it takes handling the gun the right way. If you teach yourself, you're unlikely to be doing stuff in a consistent manner that is duplicatable under stress. We know what works under stress and what doesn't work. We know from real life situations. We know from professional sports that things have to be trained in a certain manner for them to be accessible under stress and for them to fall into your unconscious so that your mind can be focused on the important things, which is what to do, when to use force, who to use force against, how much force to use. Those are the things that good people need to pay attention to and keep in their mind.
Excellent. So I'm hearing consistency is a big part of that. And consistency means repetition again and repetition of optimum techniques versus trying to try this versus try that. Coming to training, they can shortcut that process because you already know what the optimum techniques are and you can pass that on.
Absolutely. We're going to teach people what seems ridiculously basic stuff, even people that already know how to handle their gun. We're going to teach them from the beginning how to handle every portion of their equipment because we know what we want this to scale into.
Excellent. A lot of great tips there. I think that gives us some things to think about that you don't commonly hear when people talk about preparation for personal security and self-defense.
No, definitely not. Most people are focused on a different level.
Excellent. So how can people find out more about Insights Training and classes you offer?
Insightstraining.com, info@insightstraining.com. You can email us. We teach all over the Puget Sound area, actually all over the country, but for this listeners, Puget Sound area, we teach in Bellevue, in Everett, and a few other places in the area.
Great. Well, hey, thanks for coming in this morning, Greg, sharing your knowledge with us, and we look forward to talking with you another time.
Thank you, John.
Thanks again for being here. All right, that's going to wrap us up today. We want to thank you for being with us as we've talked about different areas or different aspects of home defense. And remember to email us at thinkingtactically@gmail.com with any questions or topics you'd like to hear about, and we'll get to them next week or in future episodes. Remember, you can check us out online at westcoastarmorynorth.com or stop by West Coast Armory North right here in South Everett and join us next week right here on KRKO 1380. For Thinking Tactically. We will be talking about concealed carry, bringing firearms with you on travel, and much more. So please join us next week at 9 a.m. for Thinking Tactically. Until next time, stay safe.
You're listening to Thinking Tactically, personal security for today's world. Brought to you in part by Insights Training Center, offering the most complete self-defense, firearms, and tactical training available to citizens, private organizations, law enforcement, and military. Online at insightstraining.com.
West Coast Armory North is known for its low prices and great customer service. But did you know we have training classes as well? In fact, we're introducing a new course, Handgun 101, designed with new and returning shooters in mind. Our Handgun 101 course is 3 hours long, covers handgun marksmanship, how to load, unload, and safely handle and fire a variety of handguns. All equipment is provided, and you'll leave with a free bronze membership to our range. All this for just $75. Sign up now on our website under the Classes tab at westcoastarmorynorth.com.
Insights Training Center is locally owned and nationally recognized and offers the most complete self-defense, firearms, and tactical training available to civilians and private organizations, law enforcement, and military. In business for over 20 years, they've taught more than 20,000 private citizens, law enforcement officers, instructors, SWAT teams, corrections personnel, security officers, and military personnel, offering classes from basic self-defense and handgun safety to advanced tactic classes and everything in between. Insights Training Center has a course for you. Their professional instructors come from highly specialized and thorough backgrounds in law enforcement, military special operations, and the private sector. Visit insightstraining.com for a complete list of upcoming classes.
The Northwest Women's Shooting Network is a comprehensive resource in person and online for all women's shooting needs and questions. Everything from basic education to continuing education, we are here to help you find and buy the right gun for you, get the proper skills for personal protection, and to create a welcome and safe environment to learn with other women. Coming from over 30 years of combined experience in the shooting industry, we are mothers, sisters, wives, and just plain awesome gals. In other words, just like you. Our commitment is to help you become an informed, skilled, confident woman. We are based out of West Coast Armory North in Everett, Washington, minutes north of Seattle. We offer a variety of events, seminars, training, and more. Already we have hosted a variety of events such as Kids Safety Day, Ladies Night Out, and shopping events, and we also hold regular women-only classes in addition to our Ladies Shooting Club and Ladies League. At the range, we have over 70 rental firearms for you to try before you buy, and every Thursday is Ladies Day. Find us at westcoastarmorynorth.com under the Women's Network tab and on Facebook at Northwest Women's Shooting Network.